Hi, this is Debbie, and I'm sharing a video I created for my Doodling with Debbie series for Simon Says Stamp. When I first started watercolouring, my favourite way to do so was over heat embossed flower images. It makes the watercolouring so easy as you don't have to worry about one area bleeding and blending into its neighbour if they touch when wet. I know it's December, but when I saw the winter flower stamp set, I just knew I had to stamp and paint it. The set comes with a matching die, although I didn't use it on this occasion. I started with a piece of Archer's hot pressed watercolour card. Although I prefer the texture of cold pressed card and the way the watercolours interact with that texture, in order to get a clean stamped impression, then hot pressed card gives you the best results. I placed a piece of the watercolour card in the MISTI and prepared the card with an anti-static powder. This powder prevents embossing powder randomly sticking everywhere. Once I was happy with the alignment of the winterflower image on the card, I stamped it in Versamark ink. I only use one impression of the image. This will give more clear definition in the detailed areas. The more often you stamp, the thicker the lines become and easier to heat emboss, but equally at the cost of definition in the detailed areas. So using one impression and rubbing with my painting cloths to ensure the best impression possible, I then sprinkled with Simon Says Stamp Antique Gold embossing powder and heat set. I taped the card to a board to prevent warping. In order to save on tape and adding unnecessary waste to the environment, I like to reuse my pieces of painter's tape as often as possible. I keep them on a board ready to go for the next painting session. Having taped the card in place, I started with the leaves of the bouquet. I build my confidence and get my hand and eye in by working first on areas I'm most comfortable with, and for me that is leaves. I lay down a light wash of green watercolour paint over one of the leaves. I like to use Daniel Smith watercolours. Then while the paint is still wet, I dropped in more concentrated paint into the shadow area nearest where the base of the leaf tucks into the bouquet. Each area contained by an embossed line is like a separate puddle to its neighbours. However, within the puddle, detail lines such as veins act as mini hurdles, trapping the paint while still not fully containing it and allowing it to blend with the rest of the puddle in places. I worked my way around the bouquet until all the green leaves had their first layer of paint. The joy of a heat embossed flower such as this poinsettia is that you can apply a wash of light red over the whole of the area, covering all the petals in one, and then dab back in the concentrated paint only where there will be shadows. I used a mix of Pyrrole Crimson with a touch of Pyrrole Scarlet. However, as this painting went on, the red felt too dull and heading towards the pink-purple end of the spectrum rather than red, and so I added a layer of Pyrrole Crimson to bring back the true red colour of a poinsettia flower. Whenever I paint, my aim is to look for shadows and highlights, and with this bouquet I was aiming for shadows at the base of the petals and leaves and lighter highlight areas towards their tips. On occasion the darker colours started to overtake the whole area, and so I mopped up some of the paint with a damp brush. This is known as a thirsty brush in that being drier than the painted flower, it soaks up the paint. I also added extra water to the tips of the leaves and petals to push the paint back towards the base of the leaf. You can, if need be, sop up this extra water and it will lift more of the colour if need be. I debated whether to use the die and cut the bouquet out and mount it over a background, but in the end I decided to add the background directly. I went for a creamy colour and included some green here and there to tie in the colours I used in the leaves. I like the vintage feel and the fact that the poinsettia and leaves aren't stark against an ivory background. It feels calmer and more gentle this way. Being creative, card making and painting, it is all about the connections for me, and I seek out colours and styles that give me that emotional response. Then when I gift this card to someone, I'm giving a little of myself, and the gift of the card then means so much more than just a paper and paint. Once I got the paint layers down, I darken the shadows with a dark brown pencil. This is an essential in anyone's kit, I feel, because it tones with all the colours equally, be it dark red, dark green or dark purple. Just make sure the pencil is sharp and add touches here and there. You don't want things to be too uniform. Not every leaf should have a darker section, not every petal a highlight. Things which are too uniform seem forced somehow. Nature isn't uniform, and that's what we're trying to replicate. Once I'd finished with the pencil, I added loose white gouache splatter, leftover green paint splatter and water splatter, and the three mixed and blended together. Once they were dry, I went in again with more concentrated white gouache splatter. Finally, I took a piece of chalk and rubbed lightly over the background to give a soft, broken haze over the watercolours. For the sentiment, I stamped and heat embossed a greeting from the Holiday Greetings set and die cut it with a mixed labels die. The ivory card seemed a little too stark against the watercolour background though, and so I rubbed antique linen and then tattered rose distress inks around the edges. I then splattered with water and lifted some of the colour with a damp cloth. Now the label had been suitably aged, I was ready to put this card together. I trimmed the panel to be just smaller than a 5x7-inch Desert Storm card base and used foam tape to attach the watercolour panel. I then used the tape again to add the sentiment. Finally, I embellished with Darice crystal sequins and little things from Lucy's Cards eggshell pearls held in place with Gina K Connect glue. And so there you go, a watercolour poinsettia, and the heat embossed lines made it so easy to do. They define the leaves and flowers while equally providing separate wells for paint to settle. I'll leave links in the YouTube description to the products that I've used, as well as a coordinating link to the blog post over at limedoodledesign.com. I want to thank you for joining me, and if you've enjoyed this tutorial, I'd be delighted if you'd subscribe to this channel. And before I go, here's a couple more videos to check out.